Okay, what we're going to do now is take a look at configuring identity in our startup class, but we have an extension for this. And we'll open up our identity service extensions. And what we'll do inside here is we'll configure identity. And what we'll do is we'll add another service, so we'll say services, and we say add identity. And we've got two choices here, add identity and add identity core. Now, if we were building an MVC type of application, where our client side of the application was being served by .NET, and we would use something called Razor pages, which are then served by the .NET server, then we could use the default identity. And this would give us a full setup. It would give us the pages we need, it would give us cookie-based authentication, because then the user is always maintaining a session with the server, because the server pages, or the HTML, is being generated from the server itself. We've got a different kind of application. We've gone for a single page application using Angular, and we're using token-based authorization. So what we're going to use is add identity core. And anything extra we're going to add. So we get the basics, but we'll also add on some extra stuff inside here, and we'll chain that on to our configuration. So we specify the app user as a type inside here, and then we give this some options. So inside the options, what we can do, and if we take a look at opt and then add a period, then we've got all of our different options about what we can do. And one of them, for example, is for the password. And by default, identity requires complex passwords. So if you wanted to configure this and you're using, or you're not interested in complex passwords, then you can come in here and specify what you want. And I'm just going to turn off, just as an example, the require non-alphanumeric character. And you have other options in here as well. You've got sign-in options, we've got user options. If you take a look at the sign-in options, then you can see the different things that we can configure inside here. I won't go through them. We're not going to turn off any other options. We're just going to keep the defaults for this. And what we're going to do is we're going to start chaining on services. And we want to use roles in our app. So we're going to say add roles, and I'm going to say app role for the role type that we configured, and we're going to need to bring in API entities. What we'll also need to do is add the role manager. So we add role manager, and then we give it a type of role manager, and then we pass in our app role for this type. Now be careful with these ones, because we need to pass in two types inside here. It's extremely common for me to see a question from a student where they've configured the role manager, but all they've put inside there is the app role. And then there'll be a 500 internal server error saying role manager is not available. The student comes to the startup class, they say, well, I've added the role manager, why is it not working? But we also need to specify the role manager inside here as well, and the app role. So be careful with this configuration, because it's easy to make mistakes. And then we're going to add the sign-in manager. And just like the role-in manager, we need to add the sign-in manager here as well. And then we specify the app user as the type that it's going to use. Then we need to add the role validator service. And this takes a role validator as a type, and we'll pass in the app role that this needs to work with. And then finally, we can say add entity framework stores, and we pass in our data context for this one. And this is the one we need so that it sets up our database with all of the tables we need to create the .NET identity tables. And we need to bring in data context inside here as well. So be careful with this one. You need to be exact. And each of these services also has their own type, such as role validator, sign-in manager, and role manager, and then we pass the type into those services. So everything else can stay the same, and what we're going to take a look at next is adding a new migration for this.